They said it was just a favor. Just a few visits to water my plants. What I uncovered instead was a hidden world unfolding inside my home, without my consent, without my knowledge, and orchestrated by the people who were supposed to protect me. This isn't a story about a broken lock. It's a story about broken trust. About what happens when love turns into entitlement, and silence is mistaken for permission. Hi, I'm Lisa, and this is how I uncovered the quiet betrayal hidden behind lavender candles, folded towels, and smiling family texts. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own story, you're not alone. Subscribe to ErasedMe for more stories where truth confronts betrayal, and courage walks out the door without looking back. When I returned from a 2-week business trip, the first thing I noticed was silence, too perfect, too still. The kind of silence that doesn't settle. It stalks. I hadn't even made it to my front door when Greg, my neighbor, waved me down from across the street. He looked like he hadn't slept. "Everything okay over there?" he asked, nodding toward my house like it had done something criminal. I blinked. "I've been out of town." He scratched his head. "Yeah, but we heard screaming. At night. Several times." I froze. "From my house?" He nodded slowly. "My wife almost called the cops. Thought someone was being hurt." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because that's what you do when reality starts to buckle. "That's impossible," I said. "The house has been empty." Craig didn't laugh. He just looked at me with that careful, suspicious kind of pity people save for those they think are lying to themselves. "Right," he said. "Well, just keep it down next time." I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and instantly felt off balance. Everything was too clean. Too arranged. Like the house had been expecting guests I never invited. My reflection in the entryway mirror startled me, mostly because the mirror was spotless. I don't clean like that. I survive. I wipe crumbs off counters with the same dish towel I use for everything else. Upstairs, the bed was made. Not just made, hotel made. Corners tucked, pillow fluffed, throw blanket folded in thirds. A mint might as well have been sitting on the pillow. And the air smelled unfamiliar. Like lavender and lemon and something beneath that I couldn't name, something antiseptic. Something not mine. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't check the locks. I didn't even brush my teeth. I just sat there in the middle of my own perfectly curated life, realizing I might not have been living alone at all. And whatever had been happening in my absence, it had already started long before Greg said anything. The next morning, I walked through my house like it was a museum curated by someone who vaguely remembered how I lived, but got the details just slightly wrong. The mirror in the hallway gleamed so brightly I saw every pore on my face in cruel clarity. I don't polish mirrors. I swipe at them when toothpaste splatters get too obvious. But that wasn't what got me. It was the spice drawer. Neatly alphabetized. Not in English. In Latin. I stood over it, dumbfounded. Paprika had become Capsicum annuum. There were 3 containers of it, each labeled and stacked like specimens in a lab. I hadn't bought paprika in over a year. Then there was the laundry. Folded with military precision, socks rolled into tight little coils, shirts arranged not by color, but by mood. Courageous blues, grounded grays, and one sad pile labeled uninspired neutrals in marker on a sticky note I certainly hadn't written. My skin prickled. Upstairs, the bed was still perfectly made. Tighter than I'd left it the day before. A candle I didn't own of lavender and cedarwood burned faintly on my dresser, its wax pooling on a coaster from a brewery I'd never visited. The worst part wasn't the invasion. It was the confidence of it. Someone had moved through my life like they owned it. Like they understood it better than I did. Like they thought they were improving it. I called my mom. She picked up on the second ring, cheery and bright. Hi, sweetheart. How was your trip? Did you find the trail mix I left on the counter? Mom, I said carefully, were you at my place? Oh, just to water the orchids. They looked sad. Then she added, too lightly, you really should give better instructions for tropicals. I had to improvise. And the spice drawer? She laughed. You're welcome. It was a mess. Did you bring anyone? Don't be silly, she said, and I could almost hear the eye roll. But something about her voice, it wasn't guilt. It was ownership. That's when I knew, whatever was happening in my house, she didn't think she was trespassing. She thought she was helping. The next time I saw Greg, he was unloading groceries from the trunk of his car. He hesitated when he saw me, then closed the hatch with a soft thud. Hey, I said, walking toward him slowly, my palms clammy despite the chill in the air. He glanced up. Hey. I rubbed my fingers together, then asked, what exactly did you hear, from my house? Greg exhaled. I'm not trying to stir anything up. Look, I wasn't sure if maybe you were renting it out or... I wasn't, I said. I was out of state. Alone. He looked past me to the house like it might contradict me. There were people coming and going. Not every night, but a few. Around midnight. One woman with silver hair. A guy with a duffel bag. Someone in a hoodie that never took it off. I swallowed. And the screaming? I asked. He frowned. Not shouting. Not arguing. Just pain. Like someone trying not to scream but failing anyway. My stomach turned. He hesitated, then added, this wasn't the first time. I blinked. What do you mean? There was something in March. And again in early June. People coming and going. Music. Lights. A weird smell in the air the next morning, like incense and bleach. The dates hit me like a slow-moving wave. March 10th, I had been in Atlanta. June 2nd, Denver. I went back inside and pulled out my planner, flipping through past months with shaking fingers. Each of the dates he'd mentioned matched up exactly with my business trips. The silence in the house now felt different. Not comforting, but staged. The clean surfaces, the scent of lavender, the reorganized kitchen. None of it felt accidental anymore. It felt like someone was erasing me. Not violently, but systematically. And suddenly, it wasn't just about boundaries or meddling or even control. It was about reality. I was no longer sure what had happened in my own home, only that I hadn't been there for it. I wasn't just being visited. I was being replaced. And if that was true, the scariest part wasn't that someone had been inside while I was gone. It was that they planned to come back. I didn't want to be the kind of person who installed surveillance in her own home. I wanted to believe my house was mine. A space of control, of peace, of solitude. But the quiet had started to feel like mockery. Every smooth surface, every neatly folded towel felt like a lie. Like something, or someone, was trying to rewrite me. And Greg's words clung to me like fog. March. June. Midnight. Screaming. 3 months. 3 events. 3 absences. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a pattern. I opened my laptop and started researching indoor security systems. Not just motion detectors. I wanted cameras. Small ones. Hidden. Audio-enabled. Cloud-connected. Something that couldn't be tampered with. By morning, I had 5 discreet, barely visible cameras in my cart. They arrived 2 days later in unmarked boxes. I waited until midnight, when the neighborhood had gone to sleep, to install them. One in the living room, tucked between hard covers on the bookshelf. One in the kitchen, angled from above the cabinets. One in the hallway, tucked into a decorative vase. One at the entryway, hidden behind a wall sconce. And the last one, in my bedroom, disguised as an air purifier. It felt both empowering and violating. Like I was preparing to catch ghosts but inviting them in at the same time. The night before my next work trip, a 3-day rollout meeting in Boise, I sent my mother a text. "Hey, off to Boise tomorrow. If you want to water the plants, thanks. But please, no cleaning, no rearranging. Just the plants." She replied within minutes. "I'll try not to clean. You know how I am. Safe travels, red heart." That heart emoji nearly sent me over the edge. It wasn't warmth. It was arrogance. The kind that said, "I know better than you." I stared at the cameras now embedded in my space. I had given up privacy in my own home, not to a stranger, but to my own family. Still, I had no idea what I'd actually find. But I knew this much, I was done guessing. This time, I'd watch. And I'd see everything. The first night in Boise, I watched nothing happen. From my hotel bed, laptop propped up on my knees, I clicked through each camera feed in turn. The lighting in the house was low, still. My mother came by briefly around noon, as expected. She watered the orchids, moved a photo frame half an inch to the left, and wiped down a non-existent smudge on the granite countertop. It was invasive, but familiar. Manageable. That night, I fell asleep with the feeds still open, the blue glow of the laptop burning into my eyelids. I kept one headphone in, just in case I heard something. But the house stayed quiet. I almost felt silly. The second night changed everything. It started around 8:04 p.m. I was reviewing a client's slide deck when I noticed a flicker on the entryway feed. The door opened. Slowly. Casually. Then a man stepped inside. Broad shoulders, baseball cap, duffel bag slung low. He didn't knock. Didn't pause. Walked through my hallway like it was his. 2 minutes later, a woman entered, silver braid, long coat, wine bottle in hand. Then another. And another. A man carrying a folding chair. A woman laughing softly, already taking off her boots. Within 5 minutes, there were at least 8 people in my home. None of them were my mother. I froze. I didn't breathe. My cursor hovered over the pause button on the feed, as if freezing the screen would freeze time. The living room filled like a low tide creeping in, soft music, scattered murmurs, shadows moving across walls that I'd painted myself. The camera caught them all. Then my phone rang. "Hey, where are you? We're waiting for you in the call with Mumbai." I jolted. The overseas meeting. I fumbled for my work laptop, switched windows, smiled on mute, nodded, and said words I couldn't remember. The video call was a blur. Charts. Acronyms. A man named Rishik telling me about data integration timelines. All while, in another browser window, my house was being overrun. As soon as the meeting ended, I went back to the feeds. What I saw felt like a betrayal of physics. Time should have slowed, or stopped. But no, it kept rolling, casual and indifferent. The living room was dimly lit now, aglow with candles I didn't own. A man lounged on my couch in nothing but boxer briefs. Someone had laid out items, shiny, leather, unmistakably adult, on my coffee table. Laughter floated through the hallway like perfume. Someone walked barefoot, holding a blindfold, humming. And through it all, I could hear my own heartbeat. Fast. Furious. Helpless. This wasn't just a gathering. It was a performance. A ritual. Inside my house. I was still staring at the screen when my phone rang again. Unknown number. For a second, I debated letting it go to voicemail. But my body moved before my brain could argue. Hello? Hi, is this Lisa Kessler? The voice was clipped, professional. Yes. This is Officer Brennan with Maple Glen PD. We're responding to a report of a gathering at your residence this evening. Are you aware of anyone currently using the property? I stood up, suddenly lightheaded. No. I'm in Boise. I'm not home. There was a pause, then, several individuals on site have expressed concern after discovering surveillance devices inside the home. Some were unaware they were being recorded. Your parents are present and say they were given permission to use the space. Can you confirm that? I pressed my fingers against my temples. They didn't have permission. I told my mom she could water the plants. That's it. I have the message if you need it. We'll request a copy. As of now, you're not in legal trouble. However, there may be zoning or licensing issues pending review. Zoning. Licensing. The words barely registered. Understood, I said, though I understood nothing. He hung up. I didn't. I just stood there, still holding the phone, watching my living room flicker in candlelight, now empty. The guests had cleared out like mist, leaving nothing but rumpled cushions, half-empty glasses, and the thick, nauseating scent of incense and sweat. 15 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time, it was her. Mom. I stared at the screen, dread pressing into my ribs like a vice. I almost didn't answer. But I did. Sweetheart, she said, breathless. Just tell them you knew. Okay? That was her opener. Not are you okay? Not I'm sorry. Just cover for us. What were you doing in my house? I asked. She hesitated. It wasn't illegal. We didn't hurt anyone. It was just a gathering. Like the old days. I almost laughed. You had strangers in my living room stripping down and setting up toys on my table. It was private. Intimate. Consensual. You broke in. No, she said softly. We entered through love. Then Dad's voice, low in the background, we didn't think you'd understand. So you didn't ask. We thought you'd say no. You were right, I said. And I hung up. Not in anger. In finality. Like closing a door I should have locked years ago. After I hung up, I didn't move for a long time. The room around me felt sterile, hotel-grade carpet beneath my feet, bland abstract art on the wall, air conditioning humming like a distant lie. I kept expecting to feel something sharp or rage, heartbreak, anything hot and jagged. But what settled in was quieter. It was grief. Not the kind you feel when someone dies, but the kind that creeps in when you realize something you thought was sacred never really existed. I'd always known my parents could be manipulative. I just didn't think they'd be strategic. They didn't stumble into this. They planned it. The text I sent, simple, polite, clear, was never going to be honored. It was a formality. A box to check so they could say, well, she didn't say no that strongly. They had built something in my absence. A routine. A rhythm. A system that used my house like a rotating venue for their second lives. And all that time, they smiled at me over dinners, sent emoji-filled birthday texts, dropped off fruit baskets like nothing had shifted. It hadn't been about helping with orchids or organizing spices. It had been about control. Reclamation. I had stepped away from the family pattern, chose a path without kids, without chaos, without depending on anyone, and they didn't forgive that. My house had become a symbol. Of independence. Of rejection. So they took it back. Under the banner of helping. I checked the surveillance footage again. There was a brief clip, 2 seconds, where my mother stood in the hallway alone. She reached out and touched the framed photo of me graduating, the one she once said looked too smug. Her hand hovered, then turned it face down. She didn't know the hallway cam could see that. And somehow, that was what cracked me open. Not the guests. Not the toys. Not even the lie. It was the quiet, purposeful flipping of my own image. She wasn't just trespassing. She was rewriting the story. And this time, I wasn't a character in it. I was a threat. 3 days later, a Facebook message slid into my inbox from someone I hadn't heard from in over a decade, Maya Fields. She used to hang around my parents' old circle when I was in middle school. Patchouli-scented scarves, tarot cards at brunch, always quoting Rumi like scripture. Her message was almost apologetic. I'm so sorry. I didn't know they didn't have your permission. They told us you were fine with it. I thought it was like an Airbnb for spirituals sort of thing. She added a link. No name. No branding. Just a sleek, sterile-looking site, white background, soft serif fonts, pastel icons floating like they were trying to whisper instead of speak. I clicked. The homepage greeted me with a tagline. Freedom through trust. Curated gatherings for conscious communities. Beneath that, rotating images. A candlelit dinner in a room I recognized as my dining area. A blurry wine glass resting on the coffee table I'd refinished myself during lockdown. A woman meditating in front of my fireplace, my couch cushions carefully fluffed behind her. Every photo, from inside my home. Each event listed a vague date and a poetic description. Shared expansion, March 10th. Embodied joy, June 2nd. Return to source, July 18th. Every single one aligned with my travel dates. They hadn't just used my house. They had scheduled it. Featured it. My home had become a venue. I scrolled to the bottom of the page and saw an email listed under Event Host Contact. It wasn't my mom's name. But it was her old nickname from her drum circle days, Lyra Moon, spelled backward. There was no mistaking it. It was her. I stared at the glowing screen, nausea pressing against my ribs. They hadn't just violated my space. They had marketed it. Branded it. Profited from it. This wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment. It was a business. Disguised in soft words and calming tones. Built on the assumption that I would stay quiet. That I wouldn't look too closely. That I'd keep playing the role of the distant, polite daughter who never asked too many questions. But they forgot something. I solve chaos for a living. And now, I knew exactly where to start. They showed up on a Sunday. No text. No warning. Just a knock, 3 firm taps on the front door of the house I'd just listed quietly with a real estate agent. I hadn't told anyone. The curtains were still drawn. My moving boxes sat half-packed, labels scrawled with Sharpie: office, kitchen, don't open yet. When I opened the door, they looked smaller than I remembered. My mother clutched a reusable shopping bag like she was bringing me fresh fruit, not betrayal. My father wore that same faded jacket he always used for serious talks. The one he used to wear when telling me to be less rigid or more generous with your sister. You didn't have to escalate this, she said before I even spoke. We could have handled it as a family. I didn't step aside to let them in. I didn't escalate anything, I said. One of your guests called the police. You didn't have to cooperate, my father said. You told them everything. I told them the truth. We were just trying to help your sister, my mom added. She needed support. She needed a bigger house, I replied. Silence. You said no, my father murmured. We didn't know what else to do. So you took mine? My voice cracked, not from rage, but from the brittle edge of disappointment. You didn't ask. You didn't even hint. You just assumed I wouldn't notice. You're gone all the time, my mother said, eyes pleading now. It was just sitting there. It wasn't sitting, I said, my voice sharp now. It was mine. Not unused. Not abandoned. Just not yours. They didn't answer. And maybe that was the most honest thing they'd done in years. Behind them, the sun was starting to dip. Golden light stretched across the porch, catching the dust in the air between us. You didn't just use my space, I said quietly. You sold it. You turned my home into a business. A playground. A solution to someone else's life you thought mattered more than mine. We thought you'd understand, my mother whispered. I do, I said. That's the problem. They left with the same silence they brought with them. No shouting. No slammed doors. Just the heavy, mutual understanding that something had ended. Not dramatically. Not loudly. But finally. I didn't list the house online. No photos, no open houses, no family meetings to talk things through. I called a discreet real estate agent, paid extra for privacy, and started packing before the paperwork was even finalized. It sold in under 3 weeks. The day I handed over the keys, I didn't feel sadness. Not exactly. More like exhale. Like a breath I'd been holding for years without knowing it. I stood in the empty living room, my living room, and said goodbye not to walls or windows, but to the idea of being responsible for everyone else's mess. The new place is smaller. 2 bedrooms. No fireplace. But it smells like fresh paint and choice. The kind of choice you make for yourself, not to prove anything to anyone. It's farther away. Farther from them. Farther from their needs disguised as love. I didn't leave a key under the mat. I didn't give anyone a copy. I didn't even text my forwarding address. They tried calling once. Maybe twice. No voicemails. No apologies. Eventually, they stopped. My sister sent a single message. Hope you're satisfied. Now Dan and I have to move. They can't help with the mortgage anymore. I stared at it for a while before deleting it. Not because I didn't feel something, but because I did. And it wasn't guilt. It was freedom. They thought I would protect them. I thought they would protect me. Turns out we were both wrong. There was no great explosion, no fiery ending. Just a quiet unraveling. We didn't fall out. We just stopped pretending we were still in orbit. Sometimes, people don't betray you by what they do. They betray you by believing you'll never say no. But I did. And now, the only voice echoing in this house is mine. In the quiet unraveling of betrayal, we often discover who we truly are. This story isn't just about a house, it's about boundaries, dignity, and the courage to protect what no one else will, our peace. Lisa didn't rage. She didn't retaliate in a way that mirrored the chaos. She chose something much harder, she chose clarity. In the face of manipulation disguised as love, she stood firm. She said no. And that single, unwavering act was louder than all the justifications her family ever offered. Loyalty is a beautiful thing, but only when it flows in both directions. When it becomes a one-way street, where one gives and the other takes without pause. It stops being love and becomes control. This story reminds us that sometimes, protecting the truth means walking away from the people who taught you to stay silent. That courage isn't always loud, it's often quiet, deliberate, and deeply personal. We are not obligated to set ourselves on fire to keep others warm. In choosing herself, Lisa didn't just reclaim her space, she reclaimed her voice, her story, and her future. And that is a triumph far greater than revenge. It's a return to self-respect. A quiet revolution. Because the hardest truths are not the ones we tell others. They're the ones we finally dare to tell ourselves.